Imagine a world where your thoughts, maybe your deepest fears, even your fundamental sense of what's real, imagine that's all being meticulously crafted,
Hmm.
subtly shaped by unseen forces.
Hmm.
How much of what we believe, what we feel, how we act is actually our own, and how much is part of some grander, maybe covert design by the powers that govern us.
It's a really unsettling thought when you frame it like that.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to unpack a topic that is, well, it's fascinating, but frankly, yeah, a bit unsettling. Psychological warfare.
Right.
But not just in wartime. We're talking about it as a consistent, evolving tool of governance.
How states actually run things.
Exactly. We're going to explore how governments throughout history, across incredibly diverse political systems, have strategically used information, symbols, and yeah, even fear itself
Fear is a big one.
to manipulate perceptions and behaviors. And here's the crucial twist we need to keep in mind. We're talking not just about their enemies, but often about their own citizens.
Which is the really provocative part of this argument.
It really is. Our journey today is guided by this incredible source, psychological warfare and the state, from spectacle to algorithmic control.
By Schuyler Fiction.
Yeah,
It's a powerful piece.
it really is. And it makes this compelling, I'd almost say foundational argument that psychological warfare isn't just some, desperate wartime tactic you pull out against foreign adversaries.
Right, not just for the battlefield.
No. Instead, it's deep-seated, an enduring structure of governance, an inherent part of how states maintain power, applied even within a state's own borders. We'll trace its chilling evolution from the brutal pageantry of the ancient Roman arena all the way to the cutting edge of AI and algorithmic control that shapes our digital lives right now.
It's quite a suite of history.
It is. And our mission in this deep dive, it's not just to understand how these tactics evolved, how they changed over millennia, but also, critically, why they work.
Yeah, what makes us vulnerable to them?
Exactly. What deep-seated human vulnerabilities do they exploit? This will hopefully reveal the profound, sometimes uncomfortable relationship between power and our own psychologies, individual and collective. By the end of our conversation, you, our listener, should have a clearer picture of how minds are subtly and sometimes, let's face it, not so subtly controlled, giving you, hopefully, invaluable tools to think critically about the information that shapes your world every single day.
Which is increasingly important.
Absolutely. So what can you expect? We'll move chronologically. We'll weave together these rich historical case studies with psychological theories explained accessibly, hopefully to highlight both the continuities, what stays the same, and the radical transformations in this ongoing battle for the human mind.
Yeah, the through lines are fascinating.
Get ready for some surprising facts, maybe some aha moments that might just make you see the world a little differently.
Okay.
Let's unpack this.
So what Schuyler Fiction really zeroes in on right from the start is this foundational idea. Psychological warfare isn't an aberration, an exception.
Right.
It's practically a structural component of how states have always functioned. And that really challenges our sort of intuitive assumption that state control is purely physical. Laws, armies, police.
Yeah, the visible stuff.
Exactly. Instead, fiction places the deliberate shaping of the mind, of perception, of belief squarely at the center of how authority is maintained. It's about more than just managing actions. It's about managing thought itself.
That's such a powerful reframing because it suggests this invisible architecture of control that predates any modern tech. For millennia, rulers, maybe intuitively, understood that securing obedience required more than just laws or brute force. It demanded shaping perception, emotion, belief itself. So our first chapter, it really delves into these ancient methods, exploring how early states weaponized human psychology through, the sheer power of spectacle, ritual, and the strategic, often terrifying cultivation of fear.
Exactly. And the core insight is that these aren't modern inventions. They're as old as governance itself. It's about leveraging what we now understand as like fundamental psychological principles. And for a vivid illustration, we absolutely have to start with the grandeur and, let's be honest, the visceral terror of ancient Rome.
Rome. We often think of the Colosseum, the legions, the conquests. But what if, beneath that spectacle, Rome was pioneering some of the most effective and frankly terrifying psychological tactics that still echo today?
Oh, absolutely. Rome truly exemplifies how spectacle was used as a deliberate psychological instrument of control. Think about the gladiatorial games, the public executions, those elaborate triumphal processions for victorious generals and emperors. These weren't just, bread and circuses, simple entertainment for the masses.
No.
They were incredibly calculated, meticulously staged demonstrations of power, designed to awe, intimidate, and, educate the populace.
Yeah.
By displaying the gruesome fate of criminals, rebels, prisoners of war in the Colosseum.
In front of everyone.
In front of everyone. Rome dramatized the swift, brutal consequences of disobedience right before their eyes. Hundreds of thousands watching.
It's more than just punishment then, isn't it? It's like this macabre civics lesson playing out in real time, burned into the collective memory.
Precisely.
And Michel Foucault, in his groundbreaking work, Discipline and Punish, he described these as exercises in sovereign power. He wrote that the ceremony of punishment is an opportunity of affirming the force of the law.
Affirming the force.
So it wasn't just about punishing the individual criminal. It was about publicly asserting the absolute dominance of the state, showcasing its power to inflict pain, and instilling this deep primal fear in everyone watching. The amphitheater wasn't just a place of death. It was an ideological classroom, reinforcing who held ultimate power.
Exactly. And the psychological reinforcement wasn't just limited to the arena. Propaganda permeated daily life through symbols, really pervasive symbols. Consider Roman coins and monumental architecture. Images of emperors slaying enemies, raising temples, communing with gods. These were stamped across every piece of currency, etched into every arch, every column throughout the empire.
So you couldn't escape it.
You really couldn't. This wasn't just decorative. It embedded imperial legitimacy and power into the daily lives, the consciousness of ordinary citizens.
And this is where we can sort of retroactively apply Gustave Le Bon's ideas, right? His psychology of suggestion.
Yeah, definitely. Though he wrote centuries later, Le Bon explained how that repeated exposure to powerful symbols, powerful images, could condition collective belief. It could consolidate opinions within a crowd.
So Rome was doing early mass psychological conditioning.
In a way, yes, building this almost subconscious narrative of unwavering imperial authority. And for you, our listener, think about how modern states still use public displays or symbolic gestures. Think national parades, think monumental architecture, even political branding and advertising today. The mediums have evolved dramatically, obviously. But that underlying psychological principle, using symbols to condition beliefs, it endures.
Okay, so fast forwarding quite a bit, we see the Spanish Inquisition. Institutionalizing fear, but adding this profound dimension of religious terror.
Right, from the late 15th century, really through to the early 19th. The Inquisition's trials, the threat of torture, the public autos da fe, those acts of faith, often ending in public executions, were designed to terrify entire populations.
Into what? Orthodoxy?
Into absolute spiritual and political orthodoxy, yeah. These elaborate rituals of public penance and execution, they echoed Rome's spectacles in a way, but they added the immense weight of eternal damnation to the physical terror.
So fear operated on both planes, physical and spiritual.
Exactly. Ensuring conformity through this profound, inescapable psychological terror of heresy. You couldn't escape it in this life or the next, supposedly.
And this wasn't just about outward obedience, like just showing up and saying the right things. It aimed deeper, didn't it? To the core of a person's belief.
Oh, absolutely. Robert J. Lifton's analysis of totalism, which he observed in more modern contexts like Maoist China, actually helps us interpret this.
How so?
Well, total systems rely on things like confession, denunciation, ritualized humiliation to literally break down and then remake the self.
Wow.
The Inquisition sought not just compliance with religious doctrine, but inward submission. A deep, almost spiritual, psychological transformation. They wanted to control not just what you did, but what you believed and felt at a soul level.
That's profoundly coercive.
It is. And then you have the witch trials sweeping through early modern Europe. They similarly reveal the state's, cunning use of fear as a potent tool of psychological warfare.
How'd that work?
By constructing this amorphous, terrifying category of the witch, governments and religious authorities created a highly convenient scapegoat.
For what? Anything and everything.
Pretty much. Social anxieties, political anxieties, crop failures, plague, economic downturns, internal dissent, you name it.
The collective hysteria surrounding witchcraft was meticulously sustained through state-sanctioned sermons, widely circulated pamphlets, and of course,
Public burnings,
which dramatically emphasized the state's perceived ability to expose and eradicate these invisible threats.
What's really chilling about that is how easily a state could manipulate communities into policing themselves, turning neighbor against neighbor, all based on this manufactured paranoia about an unseen enemy. It reminds me, even though he wrote much later, of Edward Bernays, the pioneer of public relations. He wrote that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society.
Yeah, it's quite a statement.
He was talking about modern PR and advertising, but that underlying principle shaping public fears to achieve control or to redirect social anxieties, it's ancient. And you can really see how easy it is to create an invisible enemy or an outsider threat today.
Yeah. And how that can be strategically used to unite or control a population, often diverting attention from other, maybe more tangible issues.
And this brings us to another really powerful example of psychological domination. Colonial India.
Right, the British Empire.
Their rule went far beyond just military force. It relied heavily on ideological narratives, portraying their presence not as conquest, but as a
civilizing mission.
Exactly, that phrase. Thomas Metcalfe notes how the legitimacy of empire was constantly reinforced through the portrayal of Indians as backward and dependent.
And this narrative was embedded everywhere.
Everywhere, not just public pronouncements. Educational systems, architectural styles, the everyday rituals of imperial authority. It was a constant, pervasive message.
And the psychologist Ashish Nandy argued that colonialism wasn't just political and economic domination. It was a fundamental reshaping of subjectivity itself.
How so? Reshaping identity.
Yeah. By systematically persuading colonized peoples to internalize their inferiority, to see themselves as needing the British civilizing hand, the British essentially turned psychological warfare into a structural condition of identity.
Wow. So it becomes part of how people see themselves.
Exactly. And this is a crucial evolution, isn't it? It's a significant shift from the overt spectacle and immediate fear of Roman punishment towards far more subtle manipulations of selfhood, slowly eroding internal resistance. And it foreshadows the sort of biopolitical strategies that Foucault later describes in the modern era, where power operates by managing life itself.
Indeed. This initial phase, from the Roman Colosseum to the British Raj, it reveals these consistent features. The calculated use of fear, the power of spectacle, strategic scapegoating, pervasive ideological suggestion.
The same toolkit, basically.
Pretty much.
Right.
But it also clearly shows this chilling evolution from external displays of immediate punishment to much more internalized forms of domination, where the mind itself, and even one's sense of self, becomes the battleground.
And that sets a very unsettling stage for the dramatic transformations that came next, particularly with the advent of mass communication.
Exactly. The 20th century, that's where things really shift gear.
It becomes almost industrial, right? This period marked the age of mass psychology. Governments, particularly totalitarian regimes, industrialized psychological manipulation through the breathtaking reach of new mass communication tech.
Radio, film, print.
Yeah. This allowed propaganda to reach millions simultaneously, creating environments of pervasive fear and absolute centralized control that earlier empires could only dream of.
That's right. The fundamental shift here is scale. Mass communication amplified psychological warfare to an unprecedented scale, making it a systematic, industrialized tool of modern governance.
So the blunt instrument of earlier eras, public squares, handwritten pamphlets.
Right. That becomes this sophisticated, pervasive system, capable of reaching every household, every mind.
Okay, so let's look at some of the most chilling examples of this colonization of the mind, starting with Hitler's Germany, the propaganda state.
Yeah. No regime better exemplifies the ruthless fusion of psychological theory with political control than Nazi Germany. Under Joseph Goebbels, the Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda orchestrated a total, all-encompassing environment of persuasion.
How did they do that practically?
Well, radio receivers were made cheap, widely available, controlled newspapers and films saturated the media landscape, and those massive rallies, famously at Nuremberg.
Visuals are iconic.
Incredibly powerful visuals, meticulously choreographed to dramatize national unity, create a sense of overwhelming collective power. And Hitler himself was marketed not just as a leader, but as this messianic figure, embodying the very will and destiny of the German people.
And it wasn't just about presenting a positive image of themselves, was it? It was equally about demonizing the other.
Absolutely crucial. Jeffrey Herf, in The Jewish Enemy, demonstrates how Nazi propaganda meticulously crafted this image of Jews as existential threats, portraying them simultaneously as immensely powerful global conspirators pulling the strings and as corrupt, parasitic elements weakening the nation from within.
That's a contradiction, isn't it? Powerful and parasitic.
It is contradictory, but emotionally incredibly potent. This framing allowed the regime to scapegoat Jews for Germany's suffering, manufacturing crises that justified incredibly radical solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even recent linguistic analysis by Alexander Landry and colleagues showing how Nazi propaganda systematically dehumanized Jews in language, stripping them of agency, of emotion, which psychologically enabled ordinary Germans to tolerate or even actively participate in their persecution. It made the unthinkable thinkable.
Just through language.
Language is powerful, and these techniques, they directly reflected and ruthlessly exploited Gustave Le Bon's insights into crowd psychology.
Back to Le Bon.
Back to Le Bon. He argued that in large crowds, individuals lose their individual rationality. They become highly suggestible, easily swayed by strong emotions and charismatic leaders.
And the Nazi rallies were designed for that.
Masterfully designed for that. Amplifying collective emotion, tribal loyalty, a shared sense of destiny, until individual dissent was simply unthinkable, drowned out by the roar of the crowd. Fear, hope, belonging, all fused into this single, overwhelming psychological environment.
It really makes you wonder how easily can a charismatic leader, combined with a tightly controlled, pervasive media environment, tap into those collective emotions and fears to direct an entire population towards actions that individually they might never contemplate.
It's a sobering thought indeed. Now, if Nazi Germany perfected mass propaganda and spectacle, Stalin's Soviet Union kind of simultaneously perfected psychological terror as a tool of governance.
How is it different?
While Soviet propaganda endlessly glorified Stalin, the father of nations, the benevolent leader, the purges and show trials of the 1930s, like the Great Purge, created this utterly pervasive culture of fear and mistrust.
So less spectacle, more terror.
More systemic terror. Neighbors were encouraged to inform on one another. Public confessions, often extracted under duress, were staged to demonstrate absolute loyalty. And history itself was systematically rewritten to erase political enemies. Inconvenient facts. Just gone.
And Sheila Fitzpatrick's work, Everyday Stalinism, highlights how this fear just infiltrated ordinary life, right?
Vividly. Citizens complied not just out of genuine belief or forced conformity, but out of sheer psychological survival. They cultivated what she called double lives.
Double lives?
Yeah, where public displays of unwavering loyalty masked private skepticism, fear, even quiet defiance. The purges weren't just physical eliminations of rivals, they were psychological spectacles, designed to warn the entire population of the dire dangers of deviation, of even a hint of disloyalty.
And this climate, it resonates with Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Milgram famously showed ordinary people would obey orders from an authority figure to inflict harm. Stalinist show trials operated on a similar chilling principle. By publicly staging obedience and brutally punishing perceived disobedience, the state conditioned citizens to follow authority without question, often overriding their own conscience.
So the scope of psychological manipulation expanded dramatically, from external propaganda to this internalized system of self-censorship and fear.
Exactly. And then, in China, Mao Zedong mobilized psychological warfare through unprecedented mass mobilization and thought reform, especially during the Cultural Revolution from 66 to 76.
What did that look like?
It unleashed waves of zealous Red Guards. The humiliated intellectuals destroyed cultural heritage, rigorously enforced ideological purity down to the smallest detail of daily life. Public self-criticisms, intense denunciations, re-education camps, these became systematic tools.
Tools for what?
To break down the individual psyche, and then reconstruct it in absolute service to the party.
Literally trying to rewire people's brains.
That was the aim. Robert J. Lifton, in Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, documented the chilling mechanisms of this Chinese brainwashing. He identified key elements like milieu control, total control over all communication, the social environment, confession, the idea of a sacred science, which was the party ideology, and the dispensing of existence, where your very right to exist depended on your ideological purity. These strategies work not just to enforce outward obedience, but to profoundly reshape identity itself, compelling individuals to internalize party ideology as an intrinsic part of their psychological makeup. Mao's regime really advanced the logic of psychological warfare, from merely manipulating behavior to fundamentally transforming thought itself.
So what's crucial here, despite the ideological differences, fascism, communism, Maoism, is that these regimes shared common, brutal techniques.
Absolutely. intense scapegoating to unify populations against a designated enemy, rampant hero worship to construct leaders as infallible, almost divine figures, and manufactured crises to justify extraordinary measures of control and suppression.
Jacques Ellul's theory of propaganda seems really relevant again here.
Very much so. Ellul argued modern propaganda succeeds not just by spreading lies, but by saturating daily life with persuasive cues until resistance becomes psychologically impossible.
Creating an envelope.
Exactly. Totalitarian regimes literally envelop citizens in propaganda environments where alternative perspectives were simply excluded, creating what Hannah Arendt in The Origins of Totalitarianism called a fictional world, where the official ideological narrative entirely replaced objective reality.
So this represents that chilling evolution, from external spectacle to a total environment, structuring every thought, every action, profoundly colonizing the mind.
And the implication here for you, our listener, is truly profound. This era shows the immense, almost terrifying power of states to fundamentally reshape reality and identity for entire populations. It makes us ask, what makes us resilient to that kind of total immersion?
Yeah. What are the inherent psychological mechanisms or maybe societal structures that allow some individuals to resist, to maintain their own sense of truth and self, even when everything around them is designed to make them conform?
It's a vital question.
It is. And it becomes even more complex as we move into our next chapter. Because while democracies, were quick to condemn totalitarian tactics,
Rightfully so.
they too have employed psychological warfare, though often in far more subtle, covert ways. This chapter explores how these societies maintain an appearance of freedom, of individual choice, while still actively shaping perceptions and even fears.
This is what we're calling the democratic paradox.
Yeah.
States that claim to champion freedom of thought and expression, while simultaneously and often secretly working to shape it.
So the core idea is that democracies use psychological warfare not through overt coercion, public terror.
Not the show trials, not the purges.
Right, but through covert persuasion.
Fair.
And the cultivation of what appears to be organic consent.
Making people want what the state wants them to want, essentially.
Kind of. So let's pull back the curtain a bit on how even a free society can subtly influence its citizens. Starting with the CIA and the covert mind during the Cold War.
Yeah, during the intense ideological struggle of the Cold War, the U.S. really embraced psychological warfare as a crucial battleground against communism. This conflict wasn't just military or economic, it was deeply psychological, waged in the minds of both domestic and foreign populations.
And the CIA was central to this.
The CIA became the central institution for these covert efforts, launching programs that, well, in retrospect, raise really serious questions about the ethical limits of state power.
Like MKUltra, John Marx's book, The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, documents this, right?
It does. MKUltra subjected unwitting American and Canadian citizens to brutal experiments. LSD, hypnosis, sensory deprivation.
Unwitting, they didn't know.
Many didn't know or didn't consent fully, all in a desperate attempt to discover viable methods of mind control, psychological manipulation. These experiments, frankly, violated every ethical standard imaginable.
And it revealed a democratic government's willingness to manipulate its own people.
A shocking willingness, yeah, to exploit its own people in pursuit of psychological advantage.
Yeah.
And similarly, Operation Mockingbird was another initiative that reportedly infiltrated domestic media.
How?
Planting stories favorable to U.S. foreign policy, blurring that critical sacrosanct line between independent journalism and state messaging.
So these secret operations, they illustrate this profound paradox. Democratic states, built on freedom of thought, freedom of expression, were simultaneously experimenting with techniques designed to control or distort those very freedoms.
Exactly. The covert nature certainly distinguishes them from the overt brutality of authoritarian regimes. But the underlying intent shaping citizen consciousness remains undeniably the same.
It forces us to confront that fundamental question. What ethical boundaries should governments absolutely never cross, even in the name of national security or ideological struggle, especially when dealing with their own citizens?
It's a critical and uncomfortable question for any democracy. And it ties into how propaganda can operate even within a free press system.
Right, because totalitarian regimes just monopolize communication. Democracies do it differently.
They leverage the apparent independence of the press to their advantage. Edward Bernays, nephew of Freud, pioneer of PR.
We mentioned him earlier.
We did. He openly described how governments and corporations could manufacture consent by strategically framing issues, shaping public narratives. He articulated this way back in 1928 in his book Propaganda, highlighting that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society.
He wasn't advocating for lying, though, was he? More like guiding perception.
Exactly, expertly guiding public perception. And this concept was further developed and critically applied by Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky in their influential 1988 book, Manufacturing Consent. Their propaganda model argued that the seemingly free press in capitalist democracies functions not as a neutral informant, but as a system with inherent filters.
Filters like what?
Economic pressures, reliance on official sources, prevailing ideologies like anti-communism or, later, anti-terrorism frameworks.
Yeah.
These filters collectively prioritize elite interests and marginalize dissenting viewpoints.
So the analysis is that citizens believe they're exercising independent judgment.
Right.
But their choices, their opinions, are subtly structured by a media environment already influenced by powerful interests. This is psychological warfare through saturation, not overt coercion. It defines the parameters of acceptable debate.
Precisely. And Jacques Ellul's analysis applies perfectly here again. Propaganda works not by outright lying, but by defining the horizon of possible thought.
What you even consider as possible.
Exactly. It subtly, almost invisibly, guides what you even consider as options, as truths, as legitimate questions. So for you, our listener, how do you discern between genuinely independent information and carefully crafted narratives in today's incredibly complex, fragmented media landscape? It's a skill that's become not just useful, but absolutely vital for maintaining cognitive autonomy.
It really has. Okay, fast forward again. The post-9/11 era. We see another potent use of fear as a psychological tool in democratic governance.
In the immediate aftermath of the attacks, the U.S. government launched this massive, pervasive campaign, directly linking terrorism to existential threats, justifying both foreign wars and extensive domestic surveillance.
And Christopher Coyne and Abigail Hall in Manufacturing Militarism, they argued that government officials...
Yeah, they argue officials leverage fear to shape public opinion, justify expanded state powers, and entrench militarism as a permanent feature of American political life.
The narrative of the war on terror, it relentlessly emphasized constant vigilance, the omnipresent danger of further attacks, enemies lurking abroad and within, creating this pervasive climate of anxiety.
Which then legitimized extraordinary measures, like the Patriot Act, warrantless wiretapping.
And this aligns so clearly with Milgram's findings on obedience again, right? When authority figures invoke a state of crisis, individuals are significantly more willing to comply with invasive policies, often sacrificing personal freedoms for perceived safety.
So democratic psychological operations achieved obedience by convincing people that increased control was their choice, a rational decision made for safety, which is a stark contrast to authoritarian purges where compliance was just brutally enforced.
It feels different, even if the outcome is similar in some ways.
It does, and this phenomenon aligns perfectly with Foucault's concept of disciplinary power.
Okay, explain that distinction again. Sovereign power versus disciplinary power.
Right. So sovereign power, like Rome's public executions, is exercised through spectacular punishment, visible, terrifying. Disciplinary power, on the other hand, operates through the minute disciplines, the controls, and the micro-penalties of everyday life.
Like what?
Think about how we're subtly regulated in schools, workplaces, even online forums. Not by a sudden public execution, but by rules, schedules, performance reviews, social media algorithms nudging us towards certain behaviors.
So it's less like a sudden blow, more like a constant, gentle pressure.
Exactly. Shaping our actions, often internalized. In democracies, these micro-controls manifest in advertising, media framing, educational narratives, surveillance justified by security. Citizens internalize the dominant ideology without necessarily perceiving it as external coercion.
Which raises that important question again for you, our listener. How much freedom are we willing to trade for a sense of security? And critically, who truly benefits from that trade-off in the long run?
It's the crucial question.
And as we move into the 21st century, the game has fundamentally changed yet again. We're entering a truly unprecedented era. This digital age has brought a radical innovation, algorithmically mediated social engineering.
Yeah. Digital tech now tailors persuasion to individuals with incredible precision and scale, creating what's aptly called an algorithmic panopticon.
Algorithmic panopticon. Break that down.
Well, it isn't just a new tool, it's a new dimension of control. Merging constant surveillance with targeted, highly personalized influence, the core idea is that psychological warfare is now granular, individualized. It operates with unprecedented scale, subtlety, and intimacy.
So it's not just mass movements anymore, broad strokes of propaganda.
No. It's about micro-targeting your individual mind, constructing a unique reality just for you, based on your data.
Here's where it gets really interesting and maybe, yeah, a little unsettling. What happens when the battle space isn't a physical field or TV screen in your living room, but your own personalized newsfeed, your social media bubble, the very curated digital world you inhabit every day?
That transition from broadcast propaganda to highly individualized computational propaganda marks a truly fundamental shift. Samuel Woolley and Philip Howard, in their work on computational propaganda, they describe how political actors now deploy sophisticated bots, algorithms, vast data analytics to manipulate social media environments. Unlike the mass appeals of a Goebbels or a Stalin aimed at a general population,
Right.
these modern methods target individuals based on incredibly detailed psychological profiles, often built from your own online behavior. Every click, every share, every search query becomes a data point, used to predict and then influence your behavior with surgical precision.
That precision transforms propaganda from a public spectacle into something private, intimate.
Deeply private, almost intimate, yeah. It's whispering directly into your ear through your screen. P.W. Singer and Emerson Brooking argue in Like War that social media isn't just a neutral platform. It's a battle space where attention itself is weaponized.
Attention is weaponized.
Memes, viral videos, coordinated disinformation campaigns, they bypass rational deliberation entirely. They operate directly on emotional reflexes, leveraging confirmation bias, tribal instincts. What was once mass suggestion has become incredibly sophisticated, micro-engineered manipulation.
It really makes you consider how much of your personal online experience, your feed, your recommendations, the ads you see, how much of that is actually a carefully curated, engineered environment designed to influence your thoughts and actions without you even realizing it.
It's a crucial question to ask ourselves constantly. And this new environment is expertly exploited by strategies like the Russian government's fire hose of falsehood model.
The fire hose of falsehood. What's that?
Christopher Paul and Miriam Matthews in their RAND report describe it meticulously. It's a strategy of high-volume, multi-channel, rapid, and repetitive disinformation, designed simply to overwhelm audiences.
How does overwhelming work psychologically?
It exploits well-known cognitive biases. For instance, people tend to believe information they encounter repeatedly, even if it's demonstrably false or contradictory. Repetition breeds familiarity.
And familiarity feels like truth.
Exactly. It can be mistaken for truth.
So it's a digital hyper-accelerated version of Ellul's idea about saturating daily life.
Very much so. But now, it's achieved through algorithmic feeds that constantly, seamlessly flood the individual's perceptual field with information, blurring lines, creating noise. The goal isn't necessarily to convince you of a specific lie.
What is it then?
It's often to sow so much confusion, to erode trust in all institutions, and to make it so incredibly difficult to discern what's true from what's not, that you simply give up trying.
And once people stop trusting any source,
They become incredibly vulnerable to anyone who claims to offer certainty, or claims to be the sole arbiter of truth.
Okay, so if repetitive falsehoods can overwhelm, what happens when reality itself becomes impossible to distinguish? Deepfakes.
Deep fakes. Yeah, this technology threatens to dissolve reality altogether, making it virtually impossible to distinguish truth from fabrication. Robert Chesney and Danielle Citron warn that deepfakes present a looming challenge to democracy.
Ah, how?
Highly sophisticated AI can generate fake audio, fake video, fabricate events that never occurred, or conversely, discredit legitimate recordings by claiming they are fake news, turning any verifiable evidence into a subject of doubt.
So the psychological consequence isn't just being deceived by one fake thing.
No, it's broader. It's a profound, widespread cynicism. Citizens may come to distrust all information, leading to an epistemic crisis where there's no shared basis for truth, leaving them profoundly vulnerable to manipulation.
And this connects back to the panopticon idea.
Exactly. In this algorithmic panopticon, which builds on Foucault's original idea of constant unseen observation, citizens never truly know which data are collected about them or how they're used. This leads to an internalized discipline, self-censorship, conformity. Personalized disinformation then ensures individuals are not only observed, but subtly guided towards beliefs and behaviors that reinforce existing power structures. It's surveillance plus manipulation.
But despite all these, well, overwhelming challenges, resistance still persists, right?
Thankfully, yes. Digital activists, independent fact-checkers, brave whistleblowers, they continually work to expose manipulation, counter disinformation, often at great personal risk. Concurrently, some citizens are developing crucial media literacy skills, critical thinking, to blunt disinformation's effects, learning to navigate the digital fog. But the fragility of democratic institutions in the face of these sophisticated technologies cannot be ignored. Digital psychological warfare is diffuse, personalized, often invisible. Unlike the overt, shouting propaganda of totalitarian regimes, it whispers through your feeds, your notifications, your curated realities, making it incredibly hard to identify, let alone resist.
So as we wrap up this journey, we see this remarkable continuity, psychological warfare across millennia. The same fundamental elements of Virion, fear, scapegoating, spectacle, but now embedded in the invisible, intricate architectures of our digital world.
If 20th century propaganda aimed to colonize the crowd, the 21st century's algorithmic control seeks to colonize the individual mind, one personalized feed at a time.
Which brings us to that final crucial question for you, our listener. What are your specific actionable strategies for navigating a world where reality itself can be so easily manufactured, challenged, and even weaponized?
It's something we all need to think about.
Okay, so what does this all mean for us right now? We've journeyed from the Roman Colosseum's brutal spectacles of power all the way to the digital panopticon of our interconnected age. What's truly fascinating, and yeah, maybe a little chilling, is that consistent thread weaving through all these eras. Governments, regardless of their political stripe, their technological sophistication, have always in some form weaponized psychology to secure and maintain power over their people.
The underlying logic across all eras, despite the changing methods, it's the exploitation of fundamental human vulnerabilities. Our deep susceptibility to fear, our innate need for conformity, for belonging, our often unquestioning deference to authority, as illuminated by thinkers like Le Bon on crowd psychology, Milgram on obedience, Lifton on totalism, Foucault on discipline and biopolitics. These psychological insights explain why these tactics succeed again and again.
The battle for power, ultimately, isn't just fought on physical battlefields or in legislative chambers. It's fought profoundly within the very minds of citizens, shaping their perception of reality.
Absolutely. Yet the history of psychological warfare also demonstrates an enduring legacy of resistance.
That's important, too.
Very important. From dissidents circulating underground presses in totalitarian states, to colonized peoples reasserting their identities against imperial narratives, to whistleblowers in democracies exposing covert psy-ops. And today, a new generation of fact-checkers, educators, digital activists continue this vital fight, seeking to inoculate populations against disinformation and manipulation, striving for greater psychological autonomy.
So, as warfare increasingly shifts from the physical domain to the informational, psychological control will undoubtedly define 21st century governance.
It seems unavoidable. Governments that master the manipulation of perception, trust, emotion will wield immense power, often disproportionate to their material strength or overt military might.
Which means the future of freedom might depend not only on the strength of our institutions or the robustness of our laws.
Important as those are.
Right, but maybe most critically on your individual capacity as a citizen. To recognize, to critically evaluate, to actively resist, and ultimately to reclaim your own psychological autonomy in this increasingly complex and subtly influential landscape.
It puts the responsibility back on us, doesn't it?
It really does. What will you do with this deep dive?